In January 2019, a company that rented out office desks was declared to be worth $47 billion. Not a technology company that had invented something the world had never seen. Not a business with a secret formula or a patent nobody could copy. A company whose actual product was this. It signed long leases on office buildings, divided them up, put in some nice furniture and free beer, and rented the desks back out to other people.
So I hope that for all of us, there's always an evolution. I think if you stop growing, then you're going the other direction. You know, we talk a lot about spiritual growth, and in spiritual growth, either you're going up or you're going down.
That is a real estate business. It is one of the oldest, simplest ideas in commerce. Be the middleman between a landlord and a tenant. And somehow, this particular version of that ancient idea had convinced the smartest investors in the world that it was worth $47 billion. 8 months later, that same company tried to sell shares to the public, and the moment ordinary people were allowed to look closely at the books, the entire $47 billion empire did not just shrink, it imploded.
WeWork was the poster child of the unsustainable startup frenzy of the 2010s.
In a matter of weeks, the valuation collapsed by around 80%. The founder was forced out. The grand stock market debut was cancelled in humiliation, and the company came within days of running out of cash entirely. So how does a company go from $47 billion to nearly worthless in the space of a single autumn? And how did so many brilliant people believe in it for so long? Stay with me, because the answer is not really about offices at all. This is WeWork. To grasp how strange that valuation was, consider this. At $47 billion, WeWork was supposedly worth more than many of the world's established, profitable airlines. More than household name companies that had built real products and turned real profits for decades. A company that, stripped of its buzzwords, sublet office space, valued above businesses with factories, fleets, and fortunes in actual earnings. The number only made sense if you believed the story. And for a while, almost everyone did. Here is the thing you have to understand from the start. This is not a story about a bad business idea. Renting flexible office space is a perfectly good business. People want it. It makes money. The story of WeWork is about something far more human and far more dangerous. What happens when a compelling story, told by a charismatic enough person, is allowed to completely detach from reality, and nobody in the room is willing to be the one to say so? And it begins with the storyteller. His name was Adam Neumann. In 2010, he and a co-founder named Miguel McKelvey started a company in New York with a simple plan. They would rent office buildings on long-term leases, renovate the spaces to look stylish and modern, and then rent out individual desks and offices to freelancers, startups, and small businesses on short, flexible terms. They called it WeWork. And at first, it worked beautifully. The timing was perfect. A whole generation of young entrepreneurs and remote workers wanted exactly this. A cool, social place to work that did not require signing a 10-year lease. WeWork spaces had exposed brick, glass walls, comfortable couches, and yes, free beer on tap. People loved them. The company grew fast, opening location after location, first across America, then around the world.
Does WeWork's implosion pose a systemic risk?
The company was an exciting, fast-growing startup on course to issue an IPO in September 2019.
But Neumann did not want to run an office rental company. That was the problem, and also the genius. Because Neumann understood something crucial about modern investing. Office rental companies are not worth very much. They are seen as boring, low-growth, low-margin businesses. Technology companies, on the other hand, companies that are growing explosively and promising to change the world, can be worth almost unlimited amounts of money. So Adam Neumann did not describe WeWork as a company that rented desks. He described it as a technology company, a community, a movement. He spoke with total conviction about WeWork's mission to, in his words, elevate the world's consciousness. He talked about it as a state of mind, a physical social network that would change how people lived and worked and even thought. And this is where the story stops being about real estate and starts being about belief. Because the more grandly Neumann described his company, the more investors wanted in. He was magnetic, tall, charismatic, endlessly confident, the kind of person who could walk into a room of hardened financiers and make them feel they were witnessing the future. He did not behave like the boss of a property company. He behaved like the prophet of a movement. Staff gathered for enormous festival-like company retreats with live music and celebrity speakers. He spoke in the language of changing the world, of community, of a new way of living. New employees were swept up in a sense of mission, the feeling that they were not renting out desks, but building something that mattered.
The man said, Scott has a special quality. When you tell him something that's not very smart, he makes this face that you can tell that he thinks you're an idiot.
It was exhilarating, and it was also, in hindsight, a warning sign. When a company that rents office space starts talking like a religion, someone should probably ask to see the accounts. Almost nobody did. He sold a vision so intoxicating that the people writing the checks stopped asking the boring questions. Questions like, how, exactly, does renting desks justify a technology company's valuation? And when does this thing actually make a profit? The biggest believer of all was a Japanese investment giant called SoftBank, and its founder, a man famous for placing enormous, audacious bets on the future. SoftBank poured billions upon billions of dollars into WeWork. And here is the strange thing about that flood of money. Rather than calming the company down, it poured fuel on the fire. Each giant investment came with a bigger valuation attached. The number went up, not because WeWork was making more money, but because a powerful investor said it was worth more. And once one giant said 47 billion, who was going to argue? And the money came with a philosophy attached. Grow at any cost. Forget profit for now. Capture the world first. Worry about making money later. So WeWork did exactly that. It opened locations at a furious pace, racing into new cities, signing lease after lease, planting its flag wherever it could. It was spending enormous sums to grow as fast as humanly possible, on the belief that scale itself would eventually turn into value. But here was the hidden danger buried in that strategy. Every one of those leases was a long-term promise. WeWork was committing to pay rent on these buildings for 10 or 15 years. Meanwhile, the customers it rented to could leave at a month's notice. The company had locked itself into mountains of long-term debt, while its income could vanish almost overnight. In good times, nobody noticed, but that mismatch was a time bomb. So the valuation climbed and climbed. 40 billion, 47 billion. On paper, Neumann was a billionaire many times over. WeWork was one of the most valuable startups on the planet.
Thursday, WeWork went public at a $9 billion valuation, 2 years after the company failed to go public under intense regulatory scrutiny.
It was leasing buildings in dozens of cities, planning to expand into housing, into schools, into gyms, an entire WeWork way of life. But underneath the beautiful story, the numbers told a very different tale. And that tale was about to be exposed in the cruelest way possible. Because in 2019, WeWork decided to do the one thing that would force it to finally tell the truth. It decided to go public, to sell shares on the stock market. And to do that, by law, it had to publish a detailed document laying out its finances for everyone to see. For years, the company's real numbers had been hidden behind Neumann's grand vision. Now, for the first time, the public was about to look inside. What they found was staggering. The document revealed that this $47 billion company was losing money at a breathtaking rate. In the previous year, it had brought in around $1.8 billion in revenue and lost almost exactly the same amount. Nearly $2 billion gone in a single year. And the losses were not shrinking as the company grew. They were growing right alongside it. The more WeWork expanded, the more money it set on fire. But the financial losses were not even the most alarming part, because the document also revealed how the company was being run. And it read less like a corporation and more like the personal kingdom of one man. By now you might be wondering how the experienced board and investors let one man accumulate this much power in the first place. And that is the quiet heart of the whole disaster. A company's board exists precisely to challenge its chief executive, to ask the hard questions, to say no. WeWork's board, packed with people who had bought into the vision and stood to profit from it, largely did not. They watched, they approved, they enabled. The checks that are supposed to catch exactly this kind of behavior had been switched off, not by accident, but because challenging the golden founder felt unthinkable while the number kept going up. Hold that thought, because this is where the hubris becomes almost cartoonish. The filing showed that Neumann had arranged the company so that he held a special class of shares, giving him 20 votes for every one that ordinary shareholders got. In practice, this meant that no matter who else owned WeWork, Neumann could not be overruled. He had near total control. But it went further. He had personally bought stakes in buildings and then leased those very buildings back to WeWork, meaning he was, in effect, paying himself rent with the company's money. He had trademarked the word "we" through a separate entity he controlled, and then charged his own company nearly $6 million for the right to use its own name. There were private jets, There were reports of wild spending, and there was even a clause addressing what would happen if he died, language pointing toward his wife having a role in choosing the company's next leader, as though it were a family throne to be inherited.
WeWork, co-founded by Adam Neumann, specialized in leasing shared workspaces in metropolitan areas around the world.
And then there was the accounting itself, which had invented its own flattering measure of success. Instead of using standard, honest measures of profit, the company promoted a bizarre, made-up metric, a version of earnings that conveniently stripped out enormous costs to make the business look healthier than it was. It was a number designed not to inform investors, but to reassure them, to keep the story alive. For years, Neumann's vision had been a spell. The public document was the moment the spell broke. Because once ordinary investors, journalists and analysts could finally see the truth, the staggering losses, the self-dealing, the absolute control, the invented accounting, the reaction was swift and brutal. The press, which had spent years celebrating Neumann as a visionary, turned on the company almost overnight. Investors who were supposed to line up to buy shares recoiled. The grand promise of a stock market debut, the moment that was meant to crown WeWork as one of the great companies of its era, fell apart in real time, in public, for everyone to watch. And now we arrive at the number. A company that had been valued just months earlier at $47 billion. Say it slowly. That's 10 zeros. And someone signed off on every single one. Within weeks of the truth coming out, that valuation did not just fall, it cratered, down to somewhere around $8 billion, and by some later measures, far less. Tens of billions of dollars in supposed value simply evaporated, because it had never truly been there in the first place. It had been a story, agreed upon by people who wanted to believe it, printed as a number. The stock offering was withdrawn, and the company that had been weeks away from a triumphant public debut was suddenly weeks away from running out of money altogether. What makes this collapse so remarkable is the sheer speed of it. This was not a slow decline over years. From the moment the financial document went public to the moment the stock offering was pulled and the founder was forced out, only about 6 weeks passed. 6 weeks to go from one of the most anticipated stock market debuts in the world to a company fighting for its survival. The story had taken 9 years to build and roughly 45 days to unravel, because the truth, once it was finally visible, traveled far faster than the myth ever had.
WeWork founder Adam Neumann now trying to buy back the company, along with Dan Loeb's third point, who might help finance a transaction. Here's what Neumann's attorney sent.
So what happened to the man at the center of it all? This is the part that tends to leave people speechless. With the company in freefall and his leadership exposed, Adam Neumann was pushed out as chief executive, but he did not leave with nothing. Far from it. As part of the deal to remove him and let SoftBank take control to try to save the company, Neumann was given an exit package reported to be worth as much as $1.7 billion, a combination of payments for his shares, a consulting fee, and credit to clear his personal debts. The man who had presided over one of the most spectacular collapses in corporate history walked away, financially, as one of the winners. The people who did not walk away as winners were the employees. Thousands of them lost their jobs in the aftermath as the company slashed costs to survive. And many of them had been paid partly in stock options, small slices of ownership they had been told could one day make them wealthy. When the valuation collapsed, those options became close to worthless. Ordinary workers who had believed in the mission, who had taken lower salaries for a piece of the dream, were left with nothing, while the founder left with a fortune. And the giant investor who had believed hardest, SoftBank, paid the steepest price of all, eventually losing well over $10 billion on its WeWork bet. The company limped on for years, a shadow of its former self, before finally filing for bankruptcy in late 2023. The official end of the story that had once been valued at $47 billion. So how did this happen? How did so many intelligent, experienced, skeptical people convince themselves that a desk rental company was worth more than some of the largest corporations in the world? The answer is the oldest trap in business, and it has nothing to do with offices. It is the power of a story to override the evidence sitting right in front of you. Neumann was not a technical genius who fooled people with complex science. His business was simple enough for anyone to understand. What he had was conviction, an absolute contagious certainty about a grand vision of the future. And in a world awash with investor money desperate to find the next world-changing company, that conviction was enough. Each big investor who bought in made the next one feel safe. The valuation became its own evidence. It must be worth a fortune, because look how much it is valued at. The reasoning ran in a perfect, beautiful circle. and almost nobody wanted to be the person who pointed out that the circle was empty in the middle. WeWork did not collapse because flexible offices are a bad idea. They are not. It collapsed because a simple business was dressed up as a revolution, because ambition was mistaken for strategy, and because a roomful of powerful people decided again and again that believing the dream was easier than checking the maths. The most expensive thing in the entire WeWork story was never the buildings, or the furniture, or the free beer. It was the story itself, and the willingness of everyone who mattered to keep telling it, right up until the moment it disappeared. No sides, no politics, just the receipts. Count the zeros.